Holy Christ! Todd nearly screamed. He was standing in the kitchen door. Doosander was slumped on his elbows, his china cup between them. Large drops of sweat stood out on his forehead. But it was not Doosander Todd was looking at. It was the blood. There seemed to be blood everywhere. It was puddled on the table, on the empty kitchen chair, on the floor. "Where are you bleeding?" Todd shouted, at last getting his frozen feet to move again. It seemed to him that he had been standing in the doorway for at least 1,000 years. "I thought you had a fucking heart attack." "It's not my blood," Doosander muttered. "What?" Todd stopped. "What did you say?" "Go downstairs. You will see what has to be done." "What the hell is this?" Todd asked. A sudden, terrible idea had come into his head. "Don't waste our time, boy. I think you will not be too surprised at what you find downstairs. I think you have had experience in such matters as the one in my cellar. First-hand experience." Todd looked at him, unbelieving, for another moment, and then he plunged down the cellar stairs, 2 by 2. His first look in the feeble yellow glow of the basement's only light made him think that Doosander had pushed a bag of garbage down here. Then he saw the protruding legs and the dirty hands held down at the sides by the cinched belt. "Holy Christ," he repeated, but this time the words had no force at all. They emerged in a slight, skeletal whisper. He pressed the back of his right hand against lips that were as dry as sandpaper. He closed his eyes for a moment, and when he opened them again, he felt in control of himself at last. Todd started moving. He saw the spade handle protruding from a shallow hole in the far corner and understood at once what Doosander had been doing when his ticker had seized up. A moment later he became fully aware of the cellar's fetid aroma, a smell like rotting tomatoes. He had smelled it before, but upstairs it was much fainter, and of course he hadn't been here very much over the past couple of years. Now he understood exactly what that smell meant, and for several moments he had to struggle with his gorge. A series of choked, gagging sounds, muffled by the hand he had clapped over his mouth and nose, came from him. Little by little, he got control of himself again. He seized the wino's legs and dragged him across to the edge of the hole. He dropped them, skidded sweat from his forehead with the heel of his left hand, and stood absolutely still for a moment, thinking harder than he ever had in his life. Then he seized the spade and began to deepen the hole. When it was 5 feet deep, he got out and shoved the derelict's body in with his foot. Todd stood at the edge of the grave, looking down. Tattered blue jeans, filthy, scab-encrusted hands. It was a stew bum, all right. The irony was almost funny. So funny a person could scream with laughter. He ran back upstairs. "How are you?" he asked Doosander. "I'll be all right. Have you taken care of it?" "I'm doing it, okay?" "Be quick. There's still some up here." "I'd like to find some pigs and feed you to them," Todd said, and went back down to the cellar before Doosander could reply. He had almost completely covered the wino when he began to think there was something wrong. He stared into the grave, grasping the spade's handle with one hand. The wino's legs stuck partway out of the mound of dirt, as did the tips of his feet. One old shoe, possibly a hush puppy, and one filthy athletic sock that might actually have been white around the time Taft was president. One hush puppy, one... Todd half ran back around the furnace to the foot of the stairs. He glanced around wildly. A headache was beginning to thud against his temples, dull drill bits trying to work their way out. He spotted the old shoe 5 feet away, overturned in the shadow of some abandoned shelving. Todd grabbed it, ran back to the grave with it, and threw it in. Then he started to shovel again. He covered the shoe, the legs, everything. When all the dirt was back in the hole, he slammed the spade down repeatedly to tamp it. Then he grabbed the rake and ran it back and forth, trying to disguise the fact the earth here had been recently turned. Not much use. Without good camouflage, a hole that has been recently dug and then filled in always looks like a hole that has been recently dug and then filled in. Still, no one would have any occasion to come down here, would they? He and Doosander would damn well have to hope not. Todd ran back upstairs. He was starting to pant. Doosander's elbows had spread wide and his head had sagged down to the table. His eyes were closed, the lids a shiny purple, the color of asters. "Doosander!" Todd shouted. There was a hot, juicy taste in his mouth, the taste of fear mixed with adrenaline and pulsing hot blood. "Don't you dare die on me, you old fuck!" "Keep your voice down," Doosander said without opening his eyes. You'll have everyone on the block over here. Where's your cleaner? Less oil, top job, something like that. And rags. I need rags. All that is under the sink. A lot of the blood had now dried on. Doosander raised his head and watched as Todd crawled across the floor, scrubbing first at the puddle on the linoleum and then at the drips that had straggled down the legs of the chair the wino had been sitting in. The boy was biting compulsively at his lips, champing at them almost like a horse at a bit. At last the job was finished. The astringent smell of cleaner filled the room. "There's a box of old rags under the stairs," Doosander said. "Put those bloody ones on the bottom. Don't forget to wash your hands." "I don't need your advice. You got me into this." "Did I? I must say you took hold well." For a moment the old mockery was in Doosander's voice, and then a bitter grimace pulled his face into a new shape. "Hurry." Todd took care of the rags, then hurried up the cellar stairs for the last time. He looked nervously down the stairs for a moment, then snapped off the light and closed the door. He went to the sink, rolled up his sleeves, and washed in the hottest water he could stand. He plunged his hands into the suds, and came up holding the butcher knife Doosander had used. "I'd like to cut your throat with this," Todd said grimly. "Yeah, and feed me to the pigs, I have no doubt of it." Todd rinsed the knife, dried it, and put it away. He did the rest of the dishes quickly, let the water out, and rinsed the sink. He looked at the clock as he dried his hands and saw it was 20 minutes after 10. He went to the phone in the hallway, picked up the receiver, and looked at it thoughtfully. The idea that he had forgotten something as potentially damning as the wino's shoe, nagged unpleasantly at his mind. What? He didn't know. If not for the headache, he might be able to get it. The triple-damned headache. It wasn't like him to forget things, and it was scary.